One hot summer afternoon, a poor 12-year-old boy spotted a stranded luxury car on the side of the road. Inside was a millionaire, frustrated and helpless with a flat tire. Most people would have walked past, but what the boy did next not only fixed the tire, it changed his entire life in a way he never could have imagined. And when you hear how this story ends, you'll believe in kindness all over again. It was one of those scorching summer afternoons when the heat seemed to wrap around everything like a heavy blanket. The air shimmered above the asphalt, and the pavement radiated warmth that could burn your feet if you stood still too long. Even the birds, usually noisy and restless, were nowhere to be seen, probably hiding in whatever shade they could find. The sound of cicadas filled the quiet, their buzzing almost like the heartbeat of the day. Along the cracked sidewalk walked Malik, a 12-year-old boy with a thin frame but an unshakable spirit. His dark, curly hair stuck slightly to his forehead from the sweat, and his t-shirt, a size too big, flapped lightly in the breeze that occasionally teased the street. His worn-out backpack bounced on his shoulders with every step. It wasn't much, faded fabric with one broken zipper, but it carried his notebooks, a pencil case, and the small dreams he tucked away every day. Malik lived in a small neighborhood on the outskirts of the city, a place where houses stood close together, paint peeling from walls, and neighbors leaned on each other more than they leaned on money. Here, people worked hard, but life always seemed one step ahead of their paychecks. Malik's own home was a small, two-bedroom apartment where he lived with his mother and little sister. His mother worked long hours at the local diner, often coming home with tired eyes but a smile that told Malik she still believed in better days. The walk home from school was something Malik had done countless times, but each step carried more than just the weight of his backpack. It carried his determination. He dreamed of a future far from the cracked sidewalks and flickering streetlights of his neighborhood, a future where he could design machines, cars, maybe even planes. Engineering fascinated him. He loved the idea of taking something broken and making it work again. On that particular afternoon, the sun seemed to challenge him, daring him to slow down. But Malik didn't. He kept walking, his sneakers scraping against the concrete. He didn't know it yet, but just a few blocks ahead, something unusual was about to happen. Something that would change the course of his life forever. As Malik turned the corner onto Maple Street, his eyes caught a glint of sunlight bouncing off something ahead. At first, he thought it was just another car, but as he got closer, his steps slowed. Parked along the roadside was a vehicle unlike anything that usually passed through his neighborhood. It was a sleek black luxury car, its glossy paint so polished it looked like liquid ink under the blazing sun. The chrome trim sparkled as though it had been cleaned just that morning. Its tinted windows gave it an air of mystery, hiding whoever might be inside. Malik had seen cars like this before, but only in glossy magazine pages, on TV shows, or when a rare, wealthy driver zipped past the city's poorer districts without stopping. The sight of it sitting still right there in front of him was almost surreal. He felt a strange mix of awe and curiosity, his gaze tracing the elegant lines of the car's body. In his mind, this was more than a car. It was a statement of success, the kind of success that felt galaxies away from the world Malik knew. But as his eyes wandered down toward the wheels, he spotted something that didn't fit with the picture-perfect image. The front right tire sagged awkwardly, the rubber crumpled against the ground. It was flat, completely helplessly flat. The shiny black car, for all its beauty and power, wasn't going anywhere. Malik's curiosity deepened. He had changed a flat tire before. His uncle had taught him one weekend when their old family sedan had given out on a dusty road. Back then it was sweaty, dirty work. But here, the thought of a luxury car sitting stuck because of a simple tire made him almost smile. Still, he felt a little uneasy. Why was this car here? Who was driving it? And more importantly, what was someone with a car like that doing in his part of town? A faint breeze stirred the hot air, and Malik realized he was staring. He adjusted his backpack, took a few steps closer, and that's when he saw a tall man in a sharp suit standing beside the car, frustration written all over his face. Malik didn't know it yet, but that moment, right there, was the first thread in a chain of events that would change his life forever. Next to the gleaming black car stood a man who looked like he had stepped straight out of a business magazine. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, and his crisp navy suit fit him, like it had been tailored by someone who charged more than Malik's family paid for rent in a month. A silk tie hung neatly from his neck, though the top button of his shirt was undone, as if the heat had finally convinced him to loosen up. But despite his polished appearance, there was nothing calm or collected about him in that moment. His brow was furrowed and tiny beads of sweat glistened on his forehead. He took out a handkerchief, wiped the sweat away, and muttered something under his breath that Malik couldn't hear. The man's shiny leather shoes were now gathering dust from the roadside, looking as out of place as the car itself. A smartphone was pressed tightly to his ear, and his tone was sharp, his words quick and clipped. From where Malik stood, he could only catch fragments. "Yes, I'm stuck. No, I can't wait that long." Every few seconds, the man's gaze would drop toward the flat tire, his lips pressing together in irritation. It wasn't just impatience, there was a kind of helplessness in his expression, too. Malik guessed the man probably hadn't changed a tire in his life. Maybe he had people for that. Maybe he was used to calling a driver, a mechanic, or some roadside service and having the problem fixed before he had to lift a finger. But this wasn't the city center. This was Malik's neighborhood, a place where roadside service might not come for hours, if at all. Malik could tell the man knew it, too, because each glance at the tire was followed by a deeper sigh, as if the reality of being stranded here was settling in. For a brief moment, Malik wondered if he should just keep walking. This wasn't his problem. But something about the way the man stood there, so out of place, so clearly in need of help, made Malik slow down. He didn't know it yet, but with one simple decision, he was about to step into a conversation that would change the rest of his life. Malik slowed his pace, his sneakers scuffing lightly against the pavement. He could feel his heartbeat picking up, not from the heat but from the choice in front of him. The tall man in the sharp suit looked like someone from a completely different world, one Malik had only glimpsed through TV, shows and store windows he couldn't afford to walk into. He had never spoken to anyone who looked so important before. Everything about the man screamed wealth, the expensive watch, glinting on his wrist, the way his suit still managed to look perfect despite the sweltering weather. Even the car, so clean it could have been in a commercial. Malik felt a flicker of doubt. Would a man like that even want help from a kid like him? A voice in his head whispered, "Just keep walking. This isn't your business." But another voice, his mother's, spoke louder in his heart. She had always told him, "If you can help, you should. Kindness is free, but it's worth more than gold." He could almost hear her saying it, the way she did whenever she handed an extra meal to a hungry neighbor or stopped to help an old woman carry groceries. Malik's hand tightened on the strap of his backpack. He looked at the man again, still pacing slightly, still glancing at the tire with that frustrated, helpless expression. The sight made Malik's hesitation fade. He knew how to change a tire. His uncle had shown him step by step last summer. If he walked away now, it would feel wrong. Taking a deep breath, Malik stepped off the sidewalk and approached the car. Each step felt heavier than it should have, like the space between him and the man was a kind of invisible wall he had to push through. When he was close enough, Malik cleared his throat. The man turned sharply, his eyes landing on him with mild surprise. Malik swallowed, then spoke as clearly as he could. "Sir," he began, trying to sound confident, "do you need help with your tire?" The words hung in the hot air for a moment. Malik wasn't sure what kind of reaction he'd get, but whatever happened next was going to be the start of something far bigger than he could imagine. The man's head tilted slightly, his eyebrows climbing in surprise. For a moment, he didn't say anything, just studied Malik as if trying to figure out if he was serious. Finally, he spoke, his voice deep and touched with disbelief. "You know how to change a tire?" Malik gave a small nod, straightening his shoulders to look more confident than he felt. "Yes, sir. My uncle showed me. It's not too hard." The man glanced from Malik's thin frame to the flat tire, then back again. A faint smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Not too hard, huh?" His tone carried the kind of skepticism adults often have when a kid claims to know how to do something usually reserved for grown-ups. Malik didn't flinch. He simply stepped a little closer to the car, his eyes scanning the situation like he was already planning what to do. His calmness seemed to make the man pause. Finally, the man let out a short chuckle. shaking his head slightly as if amused by the whole thing. "All right," he said, stepping aside and gesturing toward the car. "Go ahead, young man. Show me what you've got." There was still doubt in his eyes. Malik could see it clearly. But there was also a spark of curiosity. Maybe the man didn't believe a 12-year-old could actually fix his problem, but he was willing to watch him try. Malik's heart thumped in his chest. This was his moment, and he didn't want to mess it up. He set his backpack down on the sidewalk and crouched beside the car, his fingers brushing the metal wheel. The heat from the sun had warmed it, almost uncomfortably, but he didn't mind. He focused on what needed to be done, remembering each step his uncle had taught him. The man stood a few feet away, arms folded now, his expensive watch glinting in the light. His expression had shifted from mild amusement to something more serious, as though he was silently evaluating Malik's every move. Neither of them knew it yet. But this simple exchange, a stranger giving a boy permission to help, was the first domino in a chain that would knock down the walls between their two very different worlds. Malik crouched down, placing his backpack gently on the hot pavement. The heat radiating from the ground seeped through the knees of his worn jeans, but he ignored it. His focus locked on the flat tire. He'd done this before, but never under the watchful gaze of someone who looked like he could buy 100 cars just like this one. "All right," he murmured to himself, almost like a pep talk. He found the jack in the car's trunk, sleek and well kept, nothing like the rusty one his uncle owned. Positioning it carefully under the car's frame, Malik began cranking. The car slowly lifted, the heavy steel rising with a faint groan. Next came the lug nuts. He pulled the wrench from the trunk, fitted it to the first bolt, and twisted. The metal resisted at first, the kind of stubborn grip that made his arms strain. He leaned into it, putting his full weight behind the motion until, crack, the first one loosened. He allowed himself the smallest smile before moving to the next. By now, sweat was sliding down the side of his face, dripping onto his shirt. The air felt thick, clinging to his skin. But Malik kept going, steady, careful, methodical. He loosened each bolt in turn, remembering his uncle's words. Never rush a repair. You rush, you make mistakes. Once the bolts were free, he pulled the flat tire off, the heavy rubber scraping against the rim. He rolled it to the side and reached for the spare, which gleamed like it had barely touched the road. With practiced movements, he lined it up, slid it onto the bolts, and began tightening them back in place, one by one, in a crisscross pattern, just like he'd been taught. From the corner of his eye, Malik could see the man in the suit watching silently, his arms folded, his expression no longer amused. Finally, with everything tightened and the jack lowered, Malik gave the new tire a firm push to make sure it was secure. Only then did he wipe his forehead with the back of his hand. He glanced at the man and said simply, "Done." It had taken less than 15 minutes, but in those minutes, Malik had proven something far more valuable than speed. The man's gaze moved from the freshly changed tire to Malik's sweat-dampened face. For a moment, he simply stood there, as though he couldn't quite believe what he'd just witnessed. Then a genuine smile tugged at his lips. "That was fast," he said, his voice carrying a tone of real admiration this time. Not the polite kind adults use with kids. He reached into the inside pocket of his suit jacket and pulled out a sleek, black leather wallet. Flipping it open, he thumbed through a stack of crisp bills and pulled one out. More money than Malik usually saw in a week. Extending it toward him, the man said, "Here, take this for your trouble." Malik's eyes flicked to the money, and for a brief second, he thought about how much it could help. He could buy school supplies, maybe even new shoes. But then his mother's voice echoed in his mind, the same one that told him to help without expecting anything in return. He shook his head slowly. "No, sir," he said quietly but firmly. "I didn't help you for money." The man's hand froze mid-air. His eyebrows drew together slightly, and his expression shifted from polite gratitude to something more curious, almost probing. "Then why did you help me?" Malik hesitated for a second, shuffling his feet against the pavement. He wasn't used to explaining kindness. It was just something you did, not something you needed to justify. Finally, he lifted his head and met the man's gaze. "Because," he began, his voice soft but steady, "if I needed help, I'd hope someone would stop for me too." The words hung in the hot afternoon air, simple but heavy with meaning. The man blinked once, then again, as though Malik's answer had caught him completely off guard. There was no trace of sarcasm or cleverness in the boy's tone, just sincerity. For a long moment they stood there, the quiet broken only by the hum of distant traffic. Malik didn't know it yet, but that single sentence had struck something deep in the man, something money couldn't touch. And it was that spark, not the tire, not the speed of the repair, that would end up changing Malik's life forever. The man reached out his hand, his fingers long and firm, the kind of handshake that spoke of boardrooms and business deals. "I'm Mr. Anderson," he said, his voice carrying both authority and warmth. Malik wiped his palm quickly on the side of his jeans before taking the offered hand. His grip wasn't strong. He was only 12, but it was steady. "I'm Malik," he replied, his voice a little shy but clear enough to be heard over the faint hum of the street. For a brief moment, neither spoke. Mr. Anderson's gaze lingered on Malik, studying him in a way that made the boy feel as though the man was looking, past his worn clothes and dusty sneakers, searching for something deeper. It wasn't the quick glance adults often gave children. It was slower, more deliberate, like he was trying to read the boy's story, without a single word being spoken. Finally, Mr. Anderson nodded slightly, as though he'd found an answer only he could see. "Malik," he said, his tone softer now, "you've got something rare." Malik tilted his head, not sure what that meant. "Rare? Most people," Mr. Anderson continued, glancing briefly toward the road as if recalling other times he'd been stranded. "Wouldn't stop like you did today. Not for a stranger. Especially not without asking for something in return." Malik felt heat rise in his cheeks, not from the sun, but from the unexpected praise. He didn't think of what he'd done as rare. To him, it was just right. His mother had always taught him that kindness was something you gave freely, not something you calculated. "I just didn't want you to be stuck," Malik said, shrugging slightly. Mr. Anderson smiled faintly, but there was a look in his eyes now that Malik couldn't quite place, part admiration, part curiosity, and maybe even a touch of respect. It wasn't often that someone from Mr. Anderson, his world looked at someone from Malik's, with anything other than indifference. In that moment, a quiet connection formed between them, not because of the tire, but because Malik had reminded Mr. Anderson of something money couldn't buy. Neither of them knew it yet. But this handshake was the first step toward something far bigger than a roadside encounter. Malik bent down to pick up his backpack, ready to continue his walk home. The job was done, and he figured their short interaction was over. But before he could take more than 2 steps, Mr. Anderson's voice called out. "Malik," he said, his tone casual but carrying an edge of curiosity, "what do you want to be when you grow up?" Malik turned back, blinking in surprise. Most adults didn't ask him questions like that. They usually asked about his grades or whether he was behaving in school, but dreams? That was rare. Still, his answer came without hesitation, like it had been waiting for the right moment to escape. "An engineer," Malik said proudly. "I want to build cars." Mr. Anderson's eyebrows lifted slightly, and a small smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. "Build cars, huh?" "Yeah," Malik said, warming to the topic. "I like figuring out how things work. My uncle showed me how to fix a few things. But I want to design them, make cars better, faster, maybe even run on clean energy so they don't hurt the planet as much." His eyes lit up as he spoke, and for a moment, the heat, the dust, and the tiredness seemed to disappear. Mr. Anderson studied him, clearly intrigued. The boy wasn't just speaking from a place of childish fantasy. There was thought behind his words, ambition behind his tone. "Interesting," Mr. Anderson said finally, and this time, his smile widened into something more deliberate. "How about you come by my office this weekend? I might have something for you." Malik froze, unsure if he'd heard correctly. "Your office?" "Yes," Mr. Anderson replied smoothly. "I own a few businesses. One of them might interest you. I think you'd like to see how things are built and run. Besides," he added with a glint in his eye, "I could use more people like you around. People who see a problem and just fix it." Malik nodded slowly, still processing the offer. His mind raced with questions. Where was the office? What would he do there? And why would someone like Mr. Anderson want to see him again? Whatever the reason, Malik felt a spark of hope ignite inside him. This was more than just a flat tire. Something bigger was unfolding. That Saturday morning, Malik woke up earlier than usual. The sunlight streaming through his bedroom window seemed brighter, sharper, as if the day itself knew something important was about to happen. He carefully pulled his cleanest shirt from the hanger, a plain white button-up. His mother insisted he save for special occasions. He paired it with his least worn jeans and polished his scuffed sneakers as best he could. His mother eyed him curiously over breakfast. "Where are you headed, all dressed up?" she asked. "Just meeting someone I helped the other day," Malek replied, not wanting to explain too much before he knew what was going to happen. She nodded slowly, though her eyes lingered on him with a mix of concern and pride. The bus ride downtown felt like it took forever. Malek watched out the window as his familiar neighborhood faded away, replaced by cleaner streets, bigger stores, and buildings that seemed to stretch into the clouds. By the time the bus stopped in the city center, his stomach fluttered with nervous excitement. Mr. Anderson's office building stood like a giant mirror reflecting the sky. Its walls were made entirely of gleaming glass, catching the sunlight and scattering it in dazzling flashes. Malek craned his neck just to see the top. Stepping through the revolving glass doors, he entered a world that felt completely foreign. The air inside was cool and smelled faintly of polished wood. The marble floors were so shiny he could see his reflection in them. Gold accents trimmed the walls, and a massive chandelier hung from the ceiling like something out of a palace. People in tailored suits strode confidently past him, their shoes clicking sharply against the stone floor. Malek hesitated for a moment, suddenly aware of how out of place his worn sneakers and simple clothes looked here. But then he remembered why he was there, and the words his mother always told him, "Hold your head high. You belong wherever you work hard to be." With a deep breath, he approached the front desk and asked for Mr. Anderson. Moments later, a receptionist led him to a private elevator. As the doors closed and the elevator began to rise, Malek felt a mix of smallness and determination. He didn't know what awaited him at the top, but he was ready to find out. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, revealing a spacious office lined with floor-to-ceiling windows. Sunlight streamed in, bathing the room in a golden glow. Behind a massive oak desk sat Mr. Anderson, looking up from a stack of papers as Malek stepped inside. "Right on time," Mr. Anderson said with a smile, gesturing for him to come closer. Malik walked carefully across the plush carpet, feeling it sink slightly under his feet. Without much small talk, Mr. Anderson reached into a drawer and pulled out a sleek black folder. He slid it across the desk toward Malek. "Open it," he said simply. Malek hesitated, glancing at the man before slowly flipping it open. Inside, neatly tucked into the first pocket, was a scholarship application. But as he turned the page, his eyes widened. There was a typed letter, signed at the bottom with Mr. Anderson's name, stating in clear words that he would personally cover Malek's school expenses, not just now, but for as far into the future as Malek wanted to study. Malek blinked, unsure if he was reading it correctly. I don't understand," he said softly. "Why would you do this for me?" Mr. Anderson leaned back in his chair, his eyes steady and voice calm. "Because I believe in investing in people who show character." "You didn't help me for money, Malek. You helped because it was the right thing to do. That's rare, and it's exactly the kind of person the world needs more of." The words sank into Malik like warm sunlight breaking through clouds. He thought about the long nights his mother spent working at the diner, the worn-out textbooks he used in school, and the quiet dreams he kept tucked away because they felt too big for someone like him. Now suddenly those dreams didn't seem so far away. Malek swallowed hard, his voice trembling. "Thank you, sir." "I won't waste this." Mr. Anderson's smile deepened. "I know you won't. This isn't just an investment in your education. It's an investment in the future. Make it count." For the first time in his life, Malik felt the road ahead opening wide, like a long stretch of highway waiting for the car he would one day build. Malik felt his throat tighten, and before he could stop himself, his vision blurred. Tears welled up, threatening to spill over, but he didn't care. He wasn't the kind of boy who cried often, but in that moment, the weight of what had just happened hit him all at once. Thank you, sir," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "I don't even know what to say." Mr. Anderson gave a reassuring nod. "You've already said it by the way you live. Just keep being the person you are, Malik. That will be thanks enough. Malik clutched the black folder against his chest like it was the most valuable thing he'd ever owned. And in a way it was. It wasn't just papers. It was a future, a doorway to places he'd only dreamed of. As he left the office, the elevator ride down felt different than the ride up. On the way in, he'd been nervous, unsure of why he was even there. Now he felt taller somehow, as if an invisible weight had been lifted from his shoulders. When he stepped back onto the busy city sidewalk, the sounds of honking cars and distant chatter felt sharper, more alive. Even the air seemed lighter. He boarded the bus home, staring out the window as the glass towers faded into the smaller, worn-down buildings of his neighborhood. But instead of feeling the usual gap between those two worlds, he felt a bridge forming, a bridge he could now walk across. At home, he burst through the door, nearly startling his mother, who was setting dinner on the table. "Ma," he said, holding up the folder with both hands. "You're not going to believe this." She listened, her eyes widening with each word, her hand covering her mouth as he told her about the scholarship, the offer, and Mr. Anderson's belief in him. By the time he finished, her own eyes were wet. That night, Malik lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the day in his mind. It wasn't just the promise of education that filled him, it was the lesson. Kindness, he realized, wasn't just something you gave away. Sometimes it came back to you in ways you could never imagine. Years passed, and Malik's journey took him farther than he had ever imagined that hot summer afternoon. The boy who once walked cracked sidewalks with a worn backpack was now a respected automotive engineer, known for designing innovative, eco-friendly car models that were making headlines across the industry. His work wasn't just about speed or style. It was about creating vehicles that made the world better, cleaner, and safer. On the day of his first big public speech, Malik stood backstage looking out at an audience of hundreds. Industry leaders, young engineering students, reporters, people from all walks of life sat waiting for him to speak. He adjusted his tie, feeling a familiar flutter of nerves. Then he thought about where it had all started, and the nervousness faded. Stepping up to the podium, he scanned the room and began. "When I was 12 years old, I didn't own much more than a pair of worn sneakers, a backpack with a broken zipper, and some big dreams. One hot afternoon, walking home from school, I saw a man stranded on the side of the road with a flat tire. I almost kept walking, but my mother had always told me, if you can help, you should. So I stopped." He told them the story, the shiny black car, the man in the suit, the flat tire, and how that moment of kindness had led to an unexpected friendship, and a scholarship that opened every door he'd ever dreamed of walking through. As he spoke, the room grew silent, hanging on his every word. Finally, he reached the end. Malik smiled, his voice steady but warm. "Sometimes," he said, "the smallest good deed can change your entire life. You never know who's watching, and you never know what opportunities are waiting just around the corner. So never walk past someone who needs help. You never know how far that kindness will take you." The audience erupted in applause, not just for his achievements, but for the reminder that success isn't only built on talent or luck, it's also built on the choices we make to help others. And somewhere in the crowd that day, a young boy sat listening, wondering if maybe, just maybe, he could do something small that might change his life too. If Malik's story inspired you, remember, kindness costs nothing, but it can change everything. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, subscribe for more uplifting stories, and share this with someone who needs a little hope today. See you in the next one.